Sometimes having a big impact requires a huge contribution from a small number of people. But sometimes having a big impact is more about a huge number of people making a small contribution. And it seems to me that that is the real power of roundup donations, where people choose to round up the cost of their purchases to the nearest euro and donate the difference to a worthwhile cause. And yes, each donation might be under €1, but in Spain, for example, we've seen a total of 442,000 euros raised this way in 2023. So how do these donations work? Why do people want to make them? And are there also benefits for merchants who offer this? Let's find out in this episode of Navigating Digital Payments.
Welcome to the Navigating Digital Payments podcast, brought to you by Worldline, bringing you the latest innovations, trends, and predictions about the future of payments.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Navigating Digital Payments podcast. I'm David Daly. I look after the Discovery Hub here at Worldline. And today I'm really thrilled to be joined by two people who understand this space of roundup donations really well and are going to be able to share some fantastic insights about it. We have Cesc Carbeau, who is the Director of Strategic Partnerships at WorldCo. Hi, Cesc. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi. Thanks for inviting me. I'm so happy to be here with you to share our experience with this solution.
It's going to be really interesting to find out, the insights you have to share, Cesc. And we also have David Valero, who is the Head of Global Accounts Retail and Country Manager for Merchant Services Iberia. David, welcome to the podcast.
Hi everyone, and thanks for having me here. And I hope we will have a very interesting conversation today around this very important topic.
Thank you for joining us, David. And as I said in the introduction, in a moment, I think I'd really like to understand how roundup payments work, what some of the complexities are maybe behind the scenes, whether there are variations between different regions, different geographies in how people approach this, and also, crucially, what are some of the benefits for the merchants who offer this. But before I come on to all of that, maybe I can start with you, Cesc. I'm interested to understand because times, I think, are still quite economically tough for people. We've seen sort of higher inflation and slower growth in many different countries. But it seems that consumers are still really wanting to make these roundup donations. So do you have some explanation or some reasoning about why that's the case?
Well, we've seen different behaviors in these last years. Of course, just after COVID, the willingness to donate was quite high. And now, given the inflation context, so maybe the people is not giving as much, but still people wants to donate. And that kind of models that we are talking about, this roundup opportunity that allows you to make a small donation in a daily basis, it's what the society needs now. No, maybe not the commitment of making 50 euros donation every month, but to spread the impact into different causes in a daily basis while you are shopping for groceries or whatever. It's true that we are seeing different behaviors in different markets, So southern countries from Europe, maybe people used to give like 30% of the people is making donations in a regular basis, while in the northern countries in Europe, it's more around 60%. But what it's clear is that new generations, they want digital payments, they want to contribute in a daily basis with a small amounts. So that's why we see that this model is growing, and actually the non-profits are coming more and more to our offices, say, guys, we need this model more and more because subscription model is being it's outdated now, and it's time to update the donation channel. So that's why this is working, and we are happy for that.
And I think there's two things that you've mentioned there that I hadn't really thought of. One is that, because I thought, yes, it's a small donation, so maybe that's why people want to do it. But as you say, it's also, there's not an ongoing commitment. And I also wonder if because of course we all feel good when we make a donation, but actually when you set up a direct debit to start making a donation at the first of next month, it's quite a far off activity. Whereas with a roundup donation, it's really instant. You make the choice and it happens straight away. One thing I am sort of wondering about this is, of course, people make the donation at the point of sale. How can they have trust or confidence that the money they're adding on to the purchase is really going to a worthwhile cause? I mean,
yeah, that's a really good question, and it's actually one of the main challenges, no, that we are facing with this kind of solution, because we have such a small space in order to communicate where the money of the project is going. No, so here we can use technology in order to improve the communication with the pin pads, adding images or whatever in the future. So this is the vision about the donation product where we want to go. But then, of course, we try to be as transparent as possible. So, for instance, in each ticket, you have a donation ID through which you can later on go to Volco platform to understand better the details about the project, who is the nonprofit, etc. With all the 700 nonprofits we collaborate with, we go through a screening process to ensure good practices, transparency, etc. So we are trying to be as transparent as possible of that. It's difficult to communicate, but at the same time, you are going to a grocery store that you trust for the products that they sell, and somehow, since the company, the merchant, is the one that is choosing at the end of the day the project, you as a consumer, you can trust also that company that has chosen a proper project that it's aligned with the corporate values, but at the same time, it's being validated by a third party like Volco. No? So this is difficult to communicate at point of sale. This is the challenge that we have, but I'm sure that with technology and improving our processes, and with that kind of podcast that help us spreading the word, this can be somehow solved, no?
and it's interesting how you divide it into three areas, really. One is communicating it. The second is that the brand, the merchant, can bring some of their trust to this as well. And the third is the transparency aspect, the fact that people can, if they want to dig deeper, they can find out how the donation they have made has been used. That's really interesting. Maybe now, David, I could come on to you to understand a little bit more how it works more from a user's point of view. So if I go into a shop and I choose to make a roundup donation, how does that really work?
It's pretty simple, in fact, and that's the beauty of it. No? Basically, when you're about to pay, in the payment terminal, normally, as Seth was saying, you would potentially have like a certain image around actually the pin pad that would tell you if there's any donation campaign going on. But basically, on the pin pad itself, when you're about to pay, let's say that the cost of what you bought is 18.75 euros, the terminal itself will suggest you, do you want to round up your purchase and do a donation of this 25 cents? And then you just press yes or no. And if you press no, you just carry on with the payment. If you press yes, the same. It's exactly the same. You just pay, and then you would pay, obviously, the total amount, including the donation. So for the end user, it adds just one small step. So pretty easy. Don't forget that last year, just in Spain, we got to 1.7 million donations of this kind. Okay, so you mentioned at the beginning the total value that we collected, so above 400k euros. But the number of transactions, I think, that went through is really amazing. So 1.7 million is a lot. And the reason is it's small. The payment or what you contributed is very small, and it's easy.
And I guess that's a really important point, that it's actually a very simple step. They don't have to do any calculations. There's no choosing particularly of this amount or that amount, or how often you want to make a donation. It's one choice. Do you want to donate this or not? Takes very little time. And I guess that's how in Spain you've achieved such a high number of donations in such a space of time.
Yeah, and another point I would like to stress regarding the solution is that it's not invasive. It's not like you are going through the cashier system software and the cashier people is saying out loud, do you want to make a donation? We are keeping the same level of confidentiality as the one that you have when you are introducing your PIN. No? So this is really important in terms of user experience too.
That's a good point, because I think you're right. If if it's very loudly announced, or even if just a person is asking you, would you like to add a donation, then there's a different kind of pressure and feeling, I think, for the shopper than if it's a very personal decision made on the pin pad that no one else knows about. I mean, it's, as you say, it's a very different dynamic there.
It's also very important, though, that there's a good training of the people who work at the shop. Okay, and this is very important because when a consumer will go into the shop, sometimes he may have a doubt. Even if it's well explained on the little screen, it's true that we don't do an hour training for the end consumer, so he just needs to react on these very few seconds. So sometimes he will have doubts, and it's super important that the shop assistant would know about this campaign and what we are doing, and even be as supportive to that, because at the end, this is what we want. So it's very important that in case of doubt, the cashier may answer. But again, as Cesc was saying, not pushing anyone. This is very important. Okay. Maybe they just say to the customer, now you will see the message appearing. You just decide what you want. And that's it. And the end consumer feels, as Cesc was saying, in full confidentiality when he chooses either yes or no, because sometimes, even if it's small money, you may choose not to donate. I mean, this is a free decision completely.
And that, again, I think comes back as well to some of the things you were saying, Cesc, about the trust and also the important role the merchant plays in building that trust. Maybe having asked you there about what it's like sort of from a user perspective, maybe, David, I can ask you to say a little bit about how that actually then works behind the scenes, because I guess probably the consumer sees just one payment, but behind the scenes, how do those funds move and get allocated between the charity and the merchant?
Yeah, and this is exactly, I would say, the biggest contribution of a technology player like ourselves, Worldline, because the piece we put into all this game is precisely to make it work behind the scenes. So basically, it's very easy. So when the customer is paying, as I was saying before, basically our responsibility is to make this payment happen all together. So the basic payment plus the donation in a single transaction, we just send it to the acquirer, in fact, for it to be approved. And then we just send it back as an okay to the terminal, and then the person can go away with what he bought. In the back, then what happens also is that the merchant will receive the full amount of the transaction, so including the basic plus the donation. But in his systems, we Worldline will make sure that he has two separate entries, and he can clearly differentiate what is his money, so what he needs to keep. And then when the month comes to an end, then the merchant will transfer all this money, all the donations, will transfer them to Worldco, that will then transfer them to the entity that will receive this donation. So for the merchant, it's quite easy. He receives the full money, but it's very easy for him to differentiate what he needs to keep and what he needs to give out as a donation. And I would say that there's even cases where the merchant adds some donation itself, right?
What it's true is that they want to engage with the shoppers, with the customer, no? And sometimes you say, okay, you are making a donation, but me as a merchant, I want to make a contribution. And maybe out of 10 cents that people is giving, I'm going to give 1 cent, no? And this is something that the merchants are doing. And it's interesting because then they are joining efforts with the different customers that they have. And it's a really, really nice approach to connect with customers, right? With that kind of solutions and contributing together towards good causes. It's really good for them. Even one thing that is interesting too, David was explaining that we are getting the money and then we share it with the nonprofits, but we have also the ability through the technology in Axis to present different nonprofits in each point of sale, meaning that you can find local projects close to the supermarkets in the north of Ireland with a local NGO there. And then maybe in South Wales, we have another nonprofit. And this is the complexity that behind the scenes also Worldco handles, no? So we are getting all the money from the merchant, but then we really understand each donation to which project needs to go. And this is also value for the merchant because more and more people want to contribute to the projects that are close to their homes. No, of course, you can make international donations, and those happens, but maybe it's 10% out of the volumes that we move. No, so more and more people want to contribute close to their homes, and the technology and all this process that David explained allows that.
And maybe a sort of related question then, Cesc, is how does that work? Because in many countries, charitable donations are under a different regime when it comes to tax, for example. So how does it work in terms of tax? How is that managed?
Well, as you said, it depends on each country. So for instance, in Spain, every donor has the right to ask for a tax relief certificate, even for a donation of 10 cents. In other markets, you just have to ask when you are making a donation above 100 euros. But the point is that the technology in order to handle those cases is available. So Wolco has a platform. We talked about this donation ID that it's printed in the ticket out of the message that Axis sends to the cashier system or in the ticket. And with this donation ID, anybody can ask for a tax relief certificate. And in our platform, that's the case that the donation is from Italy and you don't need, you can not get this tax relief certificate. The platform says, in this market, there is no tax relief certificate for this amount. So we're going to share with you information about the project, but you don't have tax relief here. But in Spain, more and more people is asking for this tax relief certificate. And our vision, and this is something nice to share here, is that more and more we want to build an application, an app with the mobile phone through which people will take a picture of the ticket. So some kind of visual intelligence will process the ticket in a much easier way. And you will have your profile with the different persons you contributed. And we have the idea to build a little bit of gamification, no? And more and more this is bringing value for the customer. And of course, through the app, people will know where they can ask for these tax relief certificates.
I think that's really interesting. So it's possible, but I guess it shows how, on the one hand, making these roundup donations is simple, it's easy, it's not a commitment. But if you make a lot of them, then actually the reporting and knowing where you are with that actually perhaps becomes a bit more complex, and so therefore needs a new solution, which is what you're therefore looking at. That's really interesting. And thinking also about other things that might become more complex. David, is there anything around, say, chargebacks or refunds that then become more complex when we have these donations in play?
Not really, because at the end, as we've been saying all along, there's a clear differentiation between what is the actual good sold and what is the donation. So when it comes to a refund, in fact, it will be the policy of the merchant. He can refund the full thing. He can just refund the goods sold, or he can even ask the end consumer what does he prefer. There's full flexibility on it because the systems at the merchant level will allow to do any of this. In the system, in our portal, he can just pick up because as it is differentiated, he can refund the full thing or just the goods sold. Similar things for a chargeback. So whenever there's a chargeback, the merchant will just produce the information and everything will be clear there. I mean, normally on a chargeback, because the end consumer normally refuses that payment or does not recognize this payment, normally the whole thing will be refunded. I think that the good thing is that the system keeps very differentiated the two topics. So it gives all the flexibility.
Okay, that's really clear. And I guess that's another reason it's quite good the way that it's implemented as one payment to the merchant who then periodically makes the donations, because that then makes this chargeback or any refunds management easier, and also, as you say, gives the merchant full control over how to manage that. And also, I guess I'm mindful, we've been talking a lot about Spain. Obviously, you're both based in Spain. And I'm interested, David, have we got experience in other geographies where we're doing this? And are there any differences between different regions in how we have to approach it?
Obviously, this is not an initiative just for Spain. And just to be clear, the agreement we have with Wolco is not only for Spain, because Wolco can cover other geographies. It's also true that in certain geographies, we have a certain history behind us, okay, with other partners that are very important as well. So, for example, in the UK region, we work a lot with Pennies, okay, which is a similar approach, okay, or in France, we work with a company called Microdon, uh, all of them having the same spirit. Sometimes the actual implementation may differ for the way they work with the NGOs and the merchants. But at the end, the concept is the same. But again, we have experience all over the place. And in fact, one of the things we want to do with Volco is go to other countries. But again, here at the end, Worldline here plays the part of the technological provider. We have our connections to the merchants. Okay, so sometimes we also work with them and try to convince them to launch such an interesting project. But in reality, and Cesc can comment on that, I mean, I think the value of it is first having the proper NGOs onboarded, because at the end, this is what is attracting the interest of the end consumer, and also working with the merchants, convincing them. So we work together, or sometimes it's directly Worko that works with the merchants, convincing them. But yeah, we are all on the same boat. So we are all interested in making this grow.
Yeah, indeed. And behind the scenes, what's the work of Volco? No, it's not just partnering with you in order to enable this technology. It's also to take care of your customers, merchants, ensuring that they are happy with this kind of initiative by choosing the project, but not just like that. Also, like providing reporting about metrics, trends on donation, what is happening in each store. So we provide a BI platform for everybody to control the donations in their stores. We are working with the marketing teams in order to ensure that the message, what we're talking about, transparency, how the message, these materials at the point of sale complementing the message at the screen. So all of this work that we do with marketing, communication teams, etc., it's something that it's also really valuable for the merchants. And sometimes, for instance, with one of the partners that we have with Worldline, Bompreu, they have like plenty of requests from nonprofits, and at this moment in time, maybe every year they have like 120 nonprofits that approach them saying, I need something, no? And they say, let's talk with Volco. And somehow they are outsourcing part of the social responsibility. And all of these things are things that are happening behind the scenes and are being handled by players such as Volco. And the good point is that we have the same vision to contribute to the maximum while people is buying stuff. And I think that the vision and purpose of Penny is Microdon and Volco is the same. And it's nice that we can collaborate with big players and relevant players such as Worldline in order to increase the impact.
And from what you say there, I think you're saying that sort of some of the details of implementation might be slightly different country to country or platform by platform, but are the fundamentals the same everywhere? It's kind of one step and it's a roundup to the nearest euro or the nearest pound, or are there differences in how people want to experience it in different countries?
I think that what makes the difference is the NGO and the campaign that's behind it, to be honest with you. I think that the interest, what we feel is that it's pretty the same. As you said at the beginning, it's true, we're going through difficult times, but at the same time, because we're going through difficult times, people see that there are other people suffering more than them. So that's why they are willing to give. And when you give 25 cents, it's not like a big money. So you feel like you're still contributing, but it's not impacting you too much.
And one thing that I would like to point out regarding the solutions is that there is also certain amount of configuration options in order to adapt the user experience at the point of sale. No, the same way that you can choose the non-profit and the name of the foundation that it's presented at the pin might change. You will also adapt the roundup rules. So we are saying all the time that we are rounding to the nearest euro, but actually this is something that you can configure. No, and maybe you are coffee store, where you have really small average ticket, and then you want to say, instead of rounding up to the next euro, I'm going to make a fixed amount of 10 cents, to not being too pushy with donations with your customer, or an hotel, where average ticket is 1,000 euros. So maybe there you can ask for 5 euros donation sometimes. So yeah, that kind of configuration options are really important for adapting to different markets.
So it's interesting that perhaps it's less of a regional variation, but actually it's more to do with the type of merchant, the average ticket size, And also, David, what you were saying, that the choice of the causes that people can donate to will be quite local. But I guess that could even, as you mentioned earlier, I think that could even be quite local within a country. So it's not even a variation between countries. It could be that what should be offered to me in Nottingham might be different to what's offered to someone in London or in Manchester, for example. So I think we talked a lot there about the detail of how it looks for the user, how it works behind the scenes, and obviously we can see the benefits for the charities who receive the funds from this. In a moment, I really want to come on to the topic of what's the benefit both for the charities but also for the merchants in offering these roundup donation services. Before we come on to that, I do just want to remind people that if they want to get in contact with the podcast, give us any feedback, suggest future topics, you can reach us by emailing ndp-podcast@worldline.com, and also a ever so gentle reminder to please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast and leave us a rating and a review. So, as I said there, I'd like to come on to what are the benefits, and in a moment I'll ask you about what are the benefits for a merchant in offering this. But Cesc, maybe first you can comment a bit on what's the benefit for the charity or the NGO that wants to raise funds in this way.
Yeah, sure. It's interesting that in our model we don't have challenge, let's say, in order to find customers that at the end of the day are those nonprofits, foundations, no? And that's because these nonprofits have been thinking about building these solutions for many, many years, no? And sometimes they don't have the knowledge, technological knowledge in order to build this solution, no? So somehow we are a wide brand label for that kind of solutions for nonprofits, but not just this. It's also that these solutions are much cost effective for them, no? When you are making a subscription model, maybe in the subway or something, these people that it's attending you, there is a cost, no, for these people. So at least here in Spain, the average cost of fundraising is around 20% off. In general terms, our solutions are much cheaper for the nonprofits, and not just this for fundraising, but also brings visibility for them. So you see the logos of the nonprofits at the store, you see the messages in flyers. So this brand awareness for nonprofits, it's something that the foundations and nonprofits are really valuing a lot. So we see that for them, more and more having that kind of solutions, it's something that it's helping them keeping their activities, since the subscription model is going down and more technology and digital payments are growing, no? So that's important for them. We are a cheaper channel, an innovative channel that also bring brand awareness for nonprofits. So it's really interesting for them.
Okay, that's really clear. And then I guess now coming on to more the merchant side, I do want to ask about what the benefits are for merchants, but maybe first we can speak a little bit about what the costs are for merchants.
For Volco, the approach is that this service for the merchants has to be free of cost, or at least closer to zero cost as possible, as these merchants are providing something really important, that is the channel, the access to donors. We talked already about materials at the point of sale. We talked about training of employees in order for them to understand which is the project that the company is supporting, etc. And this is a little bit of indirect cost. But in a general manner, Volco nor Worldline will make an invoice for this service, but the idea is that there is no extra cost for the merchants, right, David?
Yeah. In fact, that would create hurdles or barriers, no, to deploy that, and this is exactly what we do not want. So as Cesc was saying, standard procedure, standard configuration works perfectly well and has no additional cost except some indirect from the merchant. For example, we are not charging anything for the transactions for managing these kind of transactions on top of the regular service. It's just in case that very big merchants will require something out of standard, a different way of integrating the solution or talking to the till system. In this case, we would just study that. But again, as Cesc was saying, the whole thing is just to try to keep it as low as possible, because we really want merchants to jump on it.
So that's clear. So what we're saying is there's no additional transaction charge for processing a charity donation. And actually, if it's off-the-shelf standard functionality that we have, it should be fairly low cost for the merchant, just some, as you say, the training and any communication materials. Of course, if there's something highly specific or customized that we haven't done before, then there might be some costs. But of course, that's quite normal. But coming now also onto the benefit side, Cesc, what do you think for the merchant is the benefit of offering consumers this facility to make roundup donations?
Yeah, of course, more and more consumers want to consume from a committed companies, no? And a challenge that the merchants are facing is how do you approach or how do you explain the different actions or which are your values? So this is a really nice tool for everybody at the point of sale to understand with which causes you are engaged. So you are approaching your values to the final shopper, making them more loyal to your stores. And also something really important, we talked about the training of employees, but it's not just this. As soon as a project is being funded, we also make these checks and giving the check to the nonprofit. And this is something that can be done by the workforce. So you are also creating this employee engagement or internal culture. The employees even can choose the projects. And this is something that helps internally and also reinforce the social responsibility strategy. We also talked about project selection and this that it's free of cost, but all of this has already a lot of value for the merchants, right? And also having a tool to help as many nonprofits as possible in a regularly basis without giving money from your pocket. It's something that the merchants also value. And at some point, they are outsourcing the relations with the nonprofits towards Volco, because maybe every week a nonprofit goes knocking the door from the merchant saying, hey, can you help me? And merchants can do many things, but sometimes they are lacking resources. So with these tools, they are helping by providing a channel of donors, but without making a huge investment. So this is also something that the merchants are liking a lot.
Maybe one final question related to that, David. Do you find that there are certain types of merchants who are more or less interested in this? Is it more for big merchants, small merchants? Is it specific sectors or verticals that have more of an interest in implementing this?
The first thing maybe we need to say is that these campaigns can be activated and deactivated at certain moments of time. This is very important for merchants, because I would say that after reviewing everything we just discussed today, maybe the only impact on a merchant is that there's an additional step in the payment. And sometimes there are merchants who prefer not to have this additional step at peak or rush hours. Okay, so this is something that first, it's important to say that this can be activated and deactivated, okay, depending on the interest of the merchant at a certain point. So coming back to which merchants do ask for that. So first, this could be interesting for everyone. It's true that the more mature customers, the ones who are more focused on customer experience, and not only that, but also CSR topics, are the ones who are asking for it more. So normally it's the biggest customers who ask for it, okay? And it's true that when you analyze our customer base today, I would say the vertical that is above the rest is grocery today. So supermarkets, etc. But it is not only supermarkets, fashion on any other business is also interested. But today, what is really on the table, and I would say that we have conversations or implementations, I would say, with all our grocery customers. So this is, I would say, I don't know, Cesc, maybe you can complement. These are the first ones who came into the table, but now the rest are just coming in.
What you said, it's right. At least at Volco, 80% of our volume comes from groceries. Sometimes with that kind of solutions, you need to build trust first. So we are happy that we grow first in groceries, and more we are growing in other verticals such as clothing, such as sports, such as hospitality, hotels, etc. Those are verticals that are showing huge interest. and hopefully we will grow as well as we have done in groceries soon.
The beauty of grocery, I would say, it's the nature of the topic, because in a grocery shop, what you have is a lot of transactions. And when I see it from a Worldline point of view, obviously the customers who have more transactions are grocery. Okay, this is where you have the biggest intensity of throughput. So that's the whole thing about donation. So a lot of transactions of small amount. So that's why the fit is perfect. But it can fit all the verticals, as Cesc was explaining before, because it doesn't have to be just rounding up to the next euro, etc. But I would say the nature comes from here. But the good thing is that everyone buys in a grocery shop one time or another. So the thing is spreading. So now all the verticals are saying, I want to do the same thing as this grocery merchant is doing. So that's why this is spreading around.
Yeah, exactly. And here the point is that in Europe, that kind of solutions are kind of new. But in United States, this has been implemented since 25, 30 years ago. But here, the point that the groceries are bringing visibility to that, it's the way that sometimes now others are calling us like, I've seen that you are the company managing that kind of solutions. We want to do that. And this is happening more and more. And we are really happy for that. Yeah.
It's interesting because I think it comes back a little bit to as well what you were saying about ticket value, that I think what you're saying, David, is it works when you have a high volume of, I'm not even saying low ticket values, but not super high. I mean, if you did it for car sales, for example, the issue is that to generate the same revenue, you would have to ask for €100 or a €200 donation, and then it's not really a roundup donation anymore. You're having to make quite a big decision, and that's not the philosophy here. It's people making lots of small donations. So it probably is more naturally fitted to verticals where that's more likely to happen. But it'll be interesting to see how that evolves. And I think, like you say, Cesc, it's quite often the case that something takes off in one space and then also moves to adjacent areas or gets slightly transformed or tweaked in the approach to work better, to be a better fit in other areas as well. So I think it's been a fascinating discussion. I've been really pleased to have you both on the podcast. I think, of course, it's interesting to understand the technical side, I would say, and how it practically works and what some of the difficulties are. I also think it's even more interesting to understand why people want to do that, why merchants are interested in it, and also where we might see this going in the future, as we have covered. So thank you so much for joining us, Cesc. It's been brilliant to have you here.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, and thanks for having us, for having Wolco, for this partnership and helping us making a huge impact, right? So thank you.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you, Cesc, and also David. Thank you so much for joining the podcast.
It was a pleasure, and it was also good to talk about this important topic and make people aware of it. So thanks for having me here as well.
Super. Been great to have you on the show. So, and that just leaves me, of course, as usual, to finally thank you, our dear listeners, for joining us once again as we navigated digital payments.
Thank you for listening to the Navigating Digital Payments podcast, brought to you by Worldline. Join us next time to learn more about the latest innovations, trends, and predictions for the future of payments.